Hello. Welcome to Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folk tales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, and I'm sitting here on a cool October night. It's been raining all afternoon, and it's just the perfect time to have a cup of sweet chai and tell a story. So, the story I have selected today is the story of Theseus. This story, if you are not familiar, ties in with the infamous labyrinth of Crete. Now, episode 1 of this podcast was about labyrinths. And it's a doozy, it's a long one, but I highly recommend you listen. However, what I will summarize is that from what I have researched about labyrinths, I have a theory. So let me break it down a little bit. So here we have the story of Theseus, right? Which arguably may be the most well-known, at least in the Western world. The story of Minotaur, which is this half beast, half man creature that was deemed too shameful to live amongst humans. So they hid him in this labyrinth where he could never escape. However, what's bizarre about this story is that the labyrinth they put him in was unicursal. And what that means is that it was not multicursal. So I'll break down what that means. Basically, a labyrinth and a maze are sometimes used interchangeably. However, more often than not, the difference between a labyrinth and a maze is that a maze is usually multicursal, meaning that there are dead ends and there are different directions you can choose, and some may not lead to the center. Whereas with a labyrinth, most of the time, it refers to a single path course that will lead to a center point. So, what's bizarre about the story of the Minotaur is that they put it in a labyrinth as a prison so that it, quote unquote, could never escape. However, it was a unicursal labyrinth. So theoretically, the Minotaur could have escaped, right? And then there is a famous story from ancient Indian culture, and the labyrinth is known as the Chakra Vyuha. And I'm pretty sure it's mentioned in the Mahabharata, but not sure. But anyway, it's mentioned in a sutra, and the labyrinth itself is a unicursal labyrinth. It's very simple, and it has a spiral center. I actually discovered this labyrinth years ago when I was meditating, and I saw it in my mind. And then I Googled labyrinth with a spiral center and discovered that it's this ancient labyrinth. However, in the sutra that it's mentioned, they describe the Chakra Vyuha as a battle formation, as a way to surround a high-ranking enemy on the battlefield and trick them into thinking they're fighting men on hand-to-hand combat. But they create the shape of a labyrinth using human bodies, and then they can transport this enemy off the battlefield. So what I find so bizarre about this image is that why not have the men create concentric circles? Why the labyrinth? And so obviously, I think with a lot of ancient stories, be it religious or folk tales, I do think that they are highly layered in symbolism and analogy. And so what I have kind of pieced together, one last thing too. I also discovered that in some parts of Asia, it is alleged that ancient kingdoms would surround their castle and town with a labyrinth as a wall. And so the word labyrinth in Asia used to mean castle or kingdom. Okay, so bear with me. What I hypothesize is that labyrinths are a mantra for calming the mind and calming the things that we consider enemy, which is our shadow or the inner beast that lives within us, the violent nature that lives within us all. And this is kind of how I came up with this because, like I mentioned years ago when I was meditating and I saw the labyrinth in my mind, it actually puzzled me for days because I was trying to figure out how to draw the labyrinth. Drawing labyrinths are really hard. I don't know if you've ever tried to draw a labyrinth like freehand, but I highly recommend you try. Like, go Google a labyrinth, choose one that you like, and try to draw it by hand. It's like a brain teaser. It's really weird. And let alone trying to draw it in your mind, like not on paper. And so I believe that these ancient stories of the labyrinths are actually coded allegories for taming the beast within you. And in the center you find the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of peace, the connection to all things. And the labyrinth is a way, a physical mantra, right? A mantra is like a chant, something that you would repeat over and over by speaking, whereas a labyrinth is a physical path that you would take that calms the mind. And interestingly too, there is a labyrinth in the Bible, the Jericho labyrinth. And it is thought also as well that it is supposed to be an allegory for reaching the kingdom of heaven. So like, maybe I'm wrong, but based on the research I've done, it really seems that I'm kind of like scratching at the surface here. And that's kind of the whole point of this podcast. I think that something I notice has been lacking a lot in the modern world, and specifically like the modern colonized world, is that we lack the mentality to understand and interpret ancient stories. I think sometimes we're asking ourselves, oh, did this really happen or is this make-believe? And I think that's the wrong question. I think a more appropriate question is, what do these elements in this story symbolize to this culture? Let's say the story has an apple in it. Like, what does the apple mean to that culture at that time? What do these symbols really mean? Because regardless if the story happened or not, there's something bigger happening with stories. What are the desires of these people? What are the values of these people? What are their spiritual beliefs? And what are the elements of the story really saying? And it's hard to know, especially if you don't have a connection with the culture or know the language. But I think if we ask different questions, I think we can have a slightly better understanding of these stories. So that being said, I am going to tell the story of Theseus, and I want to have my idea in the back of your mind. What if this story is using the labyrinth as an allegory of taming the darkness, right? Taming the quote-unquote evil or the unthinkable or the villain. And that's just my idea. I haven't heard this story since I was a kid, so I don't know how well my theory will stand up in this particular tale. But let's just see what happens, all right? Vamos a ver. Okay, here we have the adventures of Theseus. There once was a king of Athens whose name was Aegeus. He had no son, but he had 50 nephews, and they were waiting for him to die, so that one of them might be king in his stead. That's why nepotism is so stupid. Oh my God. Okay, don't even get me started. Okay, so the nephews were wild, worthless fellows, and the people of Athens looked forward with dread to the day when the city should be in their power. Yet, so long as Aegeus lived, they could not do much harm, but they were content to spend their time in eating and drinking at the king's table and in quarreling among themselves. It so happened one summer that Aegeus left his kingdom in the care of the elders of the city and went on a voyage across the Saronic Sea to the old and famous city of Troezen, which lay nestled at the foot of the mountains on the opposite shore. Troezen was not 50 miles by the water from Athens, and the purple-peaked island of Aegina lay between them. But to the people of that early time, the distance seemed very great, and it was not often that ships passed from one place to the other. And as for going by land round the great bend of the sea, that was a thing so fraught with danger that no man had ever dared try it. King Piteus of Troezen was right glad to see King Aegeus, for they had been boys together, and he welcomed him to his city and did all that he could to make his make his visit a pleasant one. So, day after day, there was feasting and merriment and music in the marble halls of old Troezen, and the two kings spent many a happy hour in talking of the deeds of their youth and of the mighty heroes whom both had known. And when the time came for the ship to sail back to Athens, Aegeus was not ready to go. He said he would stay yet a little longer in Troezen, for that the elders of the city would manage things well at home, and so the ship returned without him. Oh, silly boy. I bet you the nephews are going to take over. I want to look up this place. Troezen. I think it's Troezen. I want to see where it is on the map. Let's look at the map. Okay, so it looks like... Okay, yeah, so I'm looking at the map of Greece right now. Oh yeah, Greece is kind of like it's a really interesting map. So it looks like it's on like a little peninsula. And, help. I'm technologically challenged. Okay, I see. It is across quite a large body of water. So in the olden days, this would be a long journey. And there is this giant island in between. But you know, I feel like it would be a fun journey. This looks so beautiful. Let's take this trip. Wow. Okay, back on track. Back on track, baby. Okay. So, but Aegeus tarried, not so much for the rest and enjoyment which he was having in the home of his old friend, as for the sake of Ethra, his old friend's daughter. For Ethra was as fair as a summer morning, and she was the joy and pride of the island of Troezen. And Aegeus was never so happy as when in her presence. So it happened that some time after the ship had sailed, there was a wedding in the halls of King Piteus. But it was kept a secret, for Aegeus feared that his nephews, if they heard of it, would be very angry and would send men to Troezen to do him harm. Month after month passed by, and still Aegeus lingered with his bride and his trusted elders to see the affairs of Athens. Then, one morning, when the gardens of Troezen were full of roses and the heather was green on the hills, a babe was born to Aethra, a boy with a fair face and strong arms and eyes as sharp and bright as the mountain eagles. Sick! That's every man's dream, am I right? To have a boy with eyes as sharp and bright as mountain eagles? It's fucking sick! Okay. And now, Aegeus was more loth to return home than he had been before. And he went up on the mountain which overlooks Troezen and prayed to the goddess Athena, the queen of the air, to give him wisdom and show him what to do. Even while he prayed, there came a ship into the harbor bringing a letter to Aegeus and alarming news from Athens. Yeah, dude. I mean, come on. You can't just abandon the city as king, bro, especially when you have 40 nephews who are little dinguses who want the throne. This is amateur hour. The message read, "Come home without delay." These words of the letter which the elders had sent: "Come home quickly, or Athens will be lost. A great king from beyond the sea, Minos of Crete, is on the way with ships and a host of fighting men, and he declares that he will carry sword and fire within our walls, and will slay our young men and make our children his slaves. Come and save us." To be king in such a time. I feel like this is what people forget. Being king sucks. No, thank you. Okay. "It is the call of duty," said Aegeus, and with a heavy heart he made ready to go at once across the sea to help of his people. But he could not take Aethra and her babe for fear of his lawless nephews who would have slain them both. "Best of wives," he said, and when the hour for parting had come, he said, "Listen to me, for I shall never see your father's halls, nor hear old Troezen, nor perhaps your own fair face again. Do you remember the old plane tree which stands on the mountainside, and the great flat stone which lies a little way beyond it, and which no man but myself has ever been able to lift? Underneath that stone I have hidden my sword and the sandals which I brought from Athens. There they shall lie until our child is strong enough to lift the stone and take them for his own. Care for him, Aethra, until that time, and then, and not till then, you may tell him of his father and bid him seek me in Athens." That's so sad. Oh my God, can you imagine? To have to tell your shorty, like, I may never see you again. I have to go. Damn. That hurts my heart. Then Aegeus kissed his wife and the babe and went on board the ship. The sailors shouted. The oars were dipped into the waves. The white sail was spread to the breeze. And Aethra from her palace window saw the vessel speed away over the blue waters towards Aegina and the distant Attic shore. Also, no promises that I'm pronouncing all these names correctly, but we already knew that. And that was the end of part 1. Part 2. Year after year went by, and yet no word reached Aethra from her husband on the other side of the sea. Often and often she would climb the mountain above Troezen and sit there all day looking out over the blue waters and the purple hills of Aegina to the dim, distant shore beyond. Now and then she could see a white-winged ship sailing in the offing. But men said that it was a Cretan vessel, and very likely was filled with fierce Cretan warriors, bound upon some cruel errand of war. Then it was rumored that King Minos had seized upon all the ships of Athens, and had burned a part of the city, and had forced the people to pay him a most grievous tribute. But further than this there was no news. In the meanwhile, Ethra's babe had grown to be a tall, ruddy-cheeked lad, strong as a mountain lion, and she had named him Theseus. On the day that he was 15 years old, he went with her up to the top of the mountain, and with her looked out over the sea. "Ah, if your father would come," she sighed. "My father?" said Theseus. "Who is my father? And why are you always watching and waiting and wishing that he would come? Tell me about him." And she answered, "My child, do you see the great flat stone which lies there, half buried in the ground, and covered with moss and trailing ivy? Do you think you can lift it?" "I will try, mother," said Theseus. And he dug his fingers into the ground beside it, and grasped its uneven edges, and tugged and lifted and strained until his breath came hard, and his arms ached, and his body was covered in sweat. But the stone was moved not at all. "At last," he said, "the task is too hard for me until I have grown stronger. But why do you wish for me to lift it?" "When you are strong enough to lift it," answered Ethra, "I will tell you about your father." After that, the boy went out every day and practiced at running and leaping and throwing and lifting, and every day he rolled some stone out of its place. At first he could move only a little weight, and those who saw him laughed as he pulled and puffed and grew red in the face, but he never gave up until he had lifted it. And little by little he grew stronger, and his muscles became like iron bands, and his limbs were like mighty levers for strength. Then, on his next birthday, he went up on the mountain with his mother, and again tried to lift the great stone. But it remained fast in its place and was not moved. "I am not strong enough, mother," he said. "Have patience, my son," said Ethra. So he went on again with his running and leaping and throwing and lifting, and he practiced wrestling also, and tamed the wild horses of the plain, and hunted the lions among the mountains, and his strength and swiftness and skill were the wonder of all men. And old Troezen was filled with tales of the deeds of the boy of Theseus. Yet, when he tried again on his 17th birthday, he could not move the great flat stone that lay near the plane tree on the mountainside. "Have patience, my son," again said Ethra, but this time the tears were standing in her eyes. I'm curious, they keep saying plane tree. Do they just mean like a regular plane tree, or does that refer to a species of tree? Let's plane tree. Let's see what this means. Oh no, okay. This is a real thing. Oh, I know what this is. Okay, they're called plane trees, or platanos. Platanus. Okay, those are these trees that have those little spike balls. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those little spike balls, they grow green and then they like turn brown, and they're like almost like a cherry, but instead of a cherry, it's like a little spike ball. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh my god, that's so cool. I never know what these were called. Let's read a little bit about plane trees. I want to see if we can learn about their significance in the ancient world. Okay, cultural history. The most significant aspects of the cultural history apply to the old world of the plane tree. The tree is an important part of the literary scenery of Plato's dialogue, known as Phaedrus. Because of Plato, the tree also played an important role in the scenery of Cicero's De Oratore. The trees also provided the shade under which Aristotle and Plato's famed philosophical schools were held. It's also featured in opera. The plane tree has a frequent motif featured in classical Chinese poetry as an embodiment of sorrowful sentiments due to its autumnal shedding of leaves. Oh, this is so interesting. That's not a lot of detail, but it is clear that the plane tree was a significant tree in Rome and Greece, and that people would philosophize underneath it. So that's really cool. I love that little tidbit. Okay. So, here we go. So at this, Theseus went back again to his exercising, and he learned to wield the sword and the battle axe, and to throw tremendous weights, and to carry tremendous burdens. And men said that since the days of Hercules, or technically Heracles, I hate to be that guy, but since the day of Heracles, there was never so great strength in one body. Then, when he was a year older, he climbed the mountain yet again, another time with his mother, and he stooped and took hold of the stone, and it yielded to his touch, and lo, when he had lifted it quite out of the ground, he found underneath it a sword of bronze and sandals of gold, and these he gave to his mother. A sword of bronze, is that a thing? I didn't know that they were making bronze swords. Did you know that? Does everyone know that except for me? Bronze swords. Sorry guys, I have to research this. Not Bronze Age swords. Silly. Okay, we'll have to do this research later. I just always want to do deep dives. I'm learning so much about the ancient world. I didn't know that they were making swords of bronze. That is fascinating to me. And doesn't bronze like rust really fast? Don't you have to like clean bronze? Or am I crazy? Am I making that up? I'll do a deep dive later. I'll report back later. Okay. Finally, Theseus asked, "Tell me now about my father." Aethra knew that the time had come for which she had waited so long, and she buckled the sword to his belt and fastened the sandals upon his feet. Then she told him who his father was, and why he had left them in Troezen, and how he had said that when the lad was strong enough to lift the great stone, he must take the sword and the sandals and go and seek him in Athens. Theseus was glad when he heard this, and his proud eyes flashed with eagerness as he said, "I am ready, mother, and I will set out for Athens this very day." Then they walked down the mountain together and told King Pittheus what had happened, and showed him the sword and the sandals. But the old man shook his head sadly and tried to dissuade Theseus from going. "How can you go to Athens in these lawless times?" he said. "The sea is full of pirates. In fact, no ship from Troezen has sailed across the Saronic Sea since your kingly father went home to help of his people 18 years ago." Then, finding that this only made Theseus more determined, he said, "But if you must go, I will have a new ship built for you, staunch and stout and fast sailing, and 50 of the bravest young men in Troezen shall go with you, and mayhap with fair winds and fearless hearts you shall escape the pirates and reach Athens in safety." "Which is the most perilous way?" asked Theseus, "to go by ship or to make the journey on foot round the great bend of land?" "The sea way is full of enough perils," said his grandfather, "but the land way is beset with dangers tenfold greater. Even if there were good roads and no hindrances, the journey round the shore is a long one and would require many days. But there are rugged mountains to climb, and wide marshes to cross, and dark forests to go through. There is hardly a footpath in all that wild region, nor any place to find rest or shelter. And the woods are full of wild beasts, and dreadful dragons lurk in the marshes, and many cruel robber giants dwell in the mountains. I bet you that the giants are mad chill, and the dragons are sick as fuck, just doing cool magical spells, and the beasts are just chilling. I feel like humans always forget that. Like, you're just bad vibes, bro. That's why we just gotta get rid of you. You're just tripping all the time. Well, said Theseus, if there are more perils by land than by sea, then I should go by land. And I go at once. Theseus is a real one. I kind of love that. I kind of relate. Like, when I was a young go-hard, I was like, yeah, like, I want it rough and ready. Like, give me the hard lessons. Like, which is the harder way? I'll do it the harder way. I'm a cool guy. I totally relate. And he's like 18. Totally. Okay, so his grandfather replies, but you will at least take 50 young men, your companions, with you, right? No one shall go with me, said Theseus, and he stood up and played with his sword hilt and laughed at the thought of fear. This feels like an allegory, played with his sword hilt. I think we know what that really means. Then there was nothing more to say. He kissed his mother and bade his grandfather goodbye, and went out of Troezen towards the trackless coastland which lay to the west and north. And with blessings and tears the king and Ethra followed him to the city gates, and watched him until his tall form was lost to sight among the trees which bordered the shore of the sea. Part 3. Oh my god, this is so juicy. Let's have a sip of tea, a sip of chai. It's so delicious. Okay, part 3 is called Rough Roads and Robbers, Lions and Tigers and Bears. Oh my. With a brave heart, Theseus walked on, keeping the sea always upon his right. Soon the old city of Troezen was left far behind, and he came to the great marshes where the ground sank underneath him at every step, and green pools of stagnant water lay on both sides of the narrow pathway. But no fiery dragon came out of the reeds to meet him, and so he walked on until he came to the rugged mountain land which bordered the western shore of the sea. Then he climbed one slope after another, until at last he stood on the summit of a gray peak, from which he could see the whole country spread out around him. Then downward and onward he went again, but his way led him through a dark mountain glen, and along the edges of mighty precipices, and underneath many a frowning cliff, until he came to a dreary wood where the trees grew tall and close together, and the light of the sun was seldom seen. In that forest there dwelt a robber giant called Club Carrier, who was the terror of all the country. Lit. Dude, I'm trying to fucking blaze up with Club Carrier, dude. For oftentimes he would go down into the valleys where the shepherds fed their flocks, and would carry off not only sheep and lambs, but sometimes children and the men themselves. It was his custom to hide in the thickets of underbrush close to the pathway, and when a traveler passed that way, he would leap out upon him and beat him to death. When he saw Theseus coming through the woods, he thought that he would have a rich prize, for he knew from the youth's dress and manner that he must be a prince. Yeah, he's like, this is a rich boy. This is a rich, pretty boy. He lay on the ground where leaves of ivy and tall grass screened him from view, and he held his great iron club ready to strike. But Theseus had sharp eyes and quick ears, and neither beast nor robber giant could have taken him by surprise. When Club Carrier leaped out of his hiding place to strike him down, the young man dodged aside so quickly that the heavy club struck the ground behind him. And then, before the robber giant could raise it for a second stroke, Theseus seized the fellow's legs and tripped him up. Club Carrier roared loudly and tried to strike again, but Theseus wrenched the club out of his hands and then dealt him such a blow on the head that he never again harmed travelers passing through the forest. Then the youth went on his way, carrying the huge club on his shoulders and singing a song of victory and looking sharply around him for any other foes that might be lurking among the trees. Damn, you're gonna take Club Carrier's club? What is his name gonna be now? Whatever. Just over the ridge of the next mountain, he met an old man who warned him not to go any farther. He said that close by a grove of pine trees, which he would soon pass on his way down the slope, there dwelt a robber named Theseus, who was very cruel to strangers. He is called Pine Bender, said the old man, for when he has caught a traveler, he bends two tall, lithe pine trees to the ground and binds his captive to them, a hand and a foot to the top of one and a hand and a foot to the top of the other. Then he lets the trees fly up, and he roars with laughter when he sees the traveler's body torn in two. Damn, that's brutal. You get catapulted. You basically get like slingshotted and ripped in half at the same time. That's brutal, dude. It seems to me, said Theseus, that it is full time to ride the world of such a monster. That it is time to rid the world of such a monster. And he thanked the kind man who had warned him and hastened onward, whistling merrily as he went down towards the grove of pines. Soon he came in sight of the robber's house, built near the foot of a jutting cliff. Behind it was a rocky gorge and a roaring mountain stream, and in front of it was a garden wherein grew all kinds of rare plants and beautiful flowers. But the tops of the pine trees below were laden with bones of unlucky travelers, which hung bleaching white in the sun and wind. On a stone by the roadside sat Theseus himself, and when he saw Theseus coming, he ran to meet him, twirling a long rope in his hands and crying out, "Welcome, welcome, dear prince! Welcome to our inn, the true traveler's rest." What kind of entertainment have you?" asked Theseus. "Have you a pine tree bent down to the ground and ready for me?" "Aye, 2 of them," said the robber. "I knew that you were coming, and I bent 2 of them for you." As he spoke, he threw his rope towards Theseus and tried to entangle him in its coils. But the young man leaped aside, and when the robber rushed upon him, he dodged beneath his hands and seized his legs as he had seized Club Carrier's, and threw him heavily to the ground. Then the 2 wrestled together among the trees, but not long, for Theseus was no match for this strapping young foe. And Theseus knelt upon the robber's back as he lay prone among the leaves, and tied him with his own cord to the 2 pine trees which were already bent down. "As you would have done unto me, So will I undo to you, he said. Ooh, that's cold. Honestly, Theseus is eating right now. Then Pinebender wept and prayed and made many a fair promise. But Theseus would not hear him. He turned away, the trees sprang up, and the robber's body was left dangling from their branches. Now, this old Pinebender had a daughter named Peregrine. Peregrine. Yes, I think Peregrine. Let's say Peregrine. Peregrine, who was no more like him than a fair and tender violet is like a gnarled old oak whose feet it nestles. And it was she who cared for the flowers and the rare plants which grew in the garden by the robber's house. When she saw how Theseus had dealt with her father, she was afraid and ran to hide herself from him. "Oh, save me, dear plants," she cried, for she often talked to the flowers as though they could understand her. "Oh, I love her. Oh my God, she's one of us, you guys. What a little cutie pie. She talks to the flowers. Love her. Dear plants, save me," she said, "and I will never pluck your leaves nor harm you in any way so long as I live." There was one of the plants which up to that time had had no leaves, but came up out of the ground looking like a mere club or stick. This plant took pity on the maiden. It began at once to send out long, feathery branches with delicate green leaves, which grew so fast that Peregrine was soon hidden from sight beneath them. Theseus knew that she must be somewhere in the garden, but he could not find her, so well did the feathery branches conceal her. So he called to her. "Peregrine," he said, "you need not fear me, for I know that you are gentle and good, and it is only against things dark and cruel that I lift up my hand." The maiden peeped from her hiding place, and when she saw the fair face of youth and heard his kind voice, she came out, trembling, and she talked to him. And Theseus rested that evening in her house, and she picked some of her choicest flowers for him and gave him food. But when in the morning the dawn began to appear in the east, and the stars grew dim above the mountain peaks, he bade her farewell and journeyed onward over the hills. And Peregrine tended her plants and watched her flowers in the lone garden in the midst of the piney grove. But she never plucked the stalks of asparagus nor used them for food. And when she afterwards became the wife of a hero and had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she taught them all to spare the plant which had taken pity upon her in need. Ah, what a little sweetheart. And I guess they're saying that the plant that helped her was an asparagus plant. That is the cutest little story about a girl named Peregrine and her friend, the asparagus. This is so fun. I love this story. Peregrine. Oh. So, the road which Theseus followed now led him closer to the shore, and by he came to a place where the mountains seemed to rise sheer out of the sea, and there was only a narrow path high up along the side of the cliff. Far down beneath his feet he could hear the waves dashing ever more against the rocky wall, while above him the mountain eagles circled and screamed, and gray crags and barren peaks glistened in the sunlight. But Theseus went on fearlessly and came at last to a place where a spring of clear water bubbled out from a cleft in the rock. And there the path was narrower still, and the low doorway of a cavern opened out upon it. Close by the spring sat a red-faced giant with a huge club across his knees, guarding the road so that no one could pass. And in the sea at the foot of the cliff basked a huge turtle, its leaden eyes looking always upward for its food. Theseus knew, for Peregrine had told him, that this was the dwelling place of a robber named Skyron, who was the terror of all the coast, and whose custom it was to make strangers wash his feet, so that while they were doing so, he might kick them over the cliff to be eaten by his pet turtle below. When Theseus came up, the robber raised his club and said fiercely, "No man can pass here until he has washed my feet. Come, set to work, you bitch." He's about to be turtle food. Then Theseus smiled, and he said, "Is your turtle hungry today? And do you want me to feed him?" The robber's eyes flashed fire, and he said, "You shall feed him, but you shall wash my feet first." And with that he brandished his club in the air and rushed forward to strike. But Theseus was ready for him. With the iron club which he had taken from the club carrier in the forest, he met the blow midway, and the robber's weapon was knocked out of his hands and sent spinning away over the edge of the cliff. Then Skyron, black with rage, tried to grapple with him, but Theseus was too quick for that. He dropped his club and seized Skyron by the throat. He pushed him back against the ledge on which he had been sitting and threw him sprawling upon the sharp rocks and held him there, hanging halfway over the cliff. "Enough! Enough!" cried the robber. "Let me up, and you may pass on your own way." "It is not enough," said Theseus, and he drew his sword and sat down by the side of the spring. "You must wash my feet now. Come, set to work, bitch." "Yes! Yes, Theseus, let him have it." Then Skyron, white with fear, washed his feet. "And now," said Theseus, when the task was ended, "as you have done unto others, so will I do unto you." There was a scream in mid-air, which the mountain eagles answered from above. There was a great splashing in the water below, and the turtle fled in terror from its lurking place. Then the sea cried out, "I will have naught to do with so vile a wretch." And in a great wave cast the body of Skyron out upon the shore. Damn, even the ocean dissed him. That's fucking brutal. But it had no sooner touched the ground than the land cried out, "I will have naught to do with so vile a wretch." Damn, everyone's just dissing Skyron. And there was a sudden earthquake. The body of Skyron was thrown back into the sea, and the sea waxed furious. A raging storm arose. The waters were lashed into foam, and the waves with one mighty effort threw the detested body high into the air. And there it would have hung unto this day, had not the air itself disdained to give it lodging and changed it into a huge black rock. And this rock, which men say is the body of Skyron, may still be seen, grim, ugly, and desolate. And 1/3 of it lies in the sea, 1/3 is embedded in the sandy shore, and 1/3 is exposed to the air. Damn, fuck Skyron, I guess. That's hella brutal. I'm having so much fun. This is such a fun story. Okay, I'm looking at the time. We're almost at the hour mark, and this story is only halfway through. So I think that means we're going to save part 4 / the rest of this tale for next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for coming to Planet Earth. We need more fun, kind peppers. Thank you for coming here. If you like this episode, if you like my podcast, please send me an email. I want to hear from you. Tell me about some weird supernatural shit. Tell me about a weird folk tale. Buy some merch. We have t-shirts. We have tote bags. The information, the email, the website is in my show notes. Also, if you would like to support this podcast, I have a Patreon that is also in the show notes. It helps me create more content, helps me make more episodes. I have nothing but appreciation for you. I hope you're having the most beautiful day, the most beautiful life. Besos y abrazos. Over and out, baby.